right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show. Your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. If you're on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss an episode like today's episode with my good buddy Lake Lewis Jr. Lake, how are you?
I'm good, man. Good to be back on with you, Doug.
Always, man. You are one of the original five, and it is always good to have you back on. And I've always appreciated your support. So, thank you. It's meant a lot over the years. All right, let's get into it. Something happened today, Lake. I don't know if you heard that or not. Uh, Commanders may or may not have dropped some alternate uniforms. We'll get to what you think about it, what I think about it, but here's something interesting. Your guy, our friend Felix Trammell today had said something that I thought was interesting. He said two things at once. He said, "Don't worry that Terry's not in the photos. They were taken at media day and he wasn't there. I'm trying to figure out how many players were involved and how on earth everybody kept their mouth shut for what would have had to have been a month then, like."
Yeah, it goes to show you that they have a tight ship over there. And that's why I keep trying to tell fans, don't worry about Terry. We've seen this many times over the years. It's the nature of football, it's the nature of the business. His contract will be in the day before training camp starts, if not the day of training camp. The contract will already be signed. He'll walk out there ready to go. I truly believe that's going to happen. Okay. But yeah, for them to keep it quiet. And I had a couple people reach out to me today and say the same thing. Doug, Terry's not in any of these photos. That's not a good sign. It is what it is. I mean, he wasn't there the day that they had it going on. So yeah, they can't, business doesn't stop, and
How
let's
many
face it,
people were a part of the photo shoot? Like,
from what I was told, there's a lot. I mean,
right.
upwards of 10 players, maybe even more. But at the end of the day, it was well received, and I couldn't say anything for the longest time. But Doug, I've been saying for months that they were going back to this retro uniform, with the W for months. So actually, to go back to December during the season, I was saying this. You hear things and things, and again, and I'm telling people too, from what I know, don't worry about Terry. It's gonna get taken care of.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that he wasn't there, the fact that you don't see him in any of these photos, it could jump off to some people if they just didn't know what was being done. But my question would be this: would you rather him be in these photos, or would you rather him be in the photos when the season starts and he's ready to go?
Well, and like if you want to see a version of Terry in the retro Redskins jersey, you can find him because it was his rookie year. He's already in them. You don't have to. We don't
Very
need
good
new
point.
photos of Terry in the old Redskins
Exactly. He
jersey. He's
had
in
the
them.
full uniform, the full
Like
nine. So
you,
yeah,
you
that
can watch him score touchdowns in that jersey if you like.
good point. I like that. I like that.
Do you like these? Did they do enough for you? And you said this off air. I think most people think this is going to be, at least for the white uniform, will be the new look next year as well, right?
Yeah, I do. I believe that similar to what the Giants did a couple years back, they rolled out the
Jets did
retro
the same thing.
uniform.
Seahawks
Yep.
did the
You
same
see
thing.
it, and then this becomes boom, full blown the next
Yep.
year. And I think that, if social media today is any indication, by and
Yeah.
large, this was a huge success. A lot
Yes.
of people are happy that they reached back into the past and did this. Obviously, there are some out there that's still not good enough, and after a while, you have to start questioning fanhood of people. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news and say those things, but do you want to win or do you want to look cute? Do you want a logo, an offensive logo to some people on your helmet and you're losing? Or do you want the name of a team that, let's face it, old heads like us remember, pre Dan Snyder, but
Yes.
this young fan base, they don't remember any winning. Maybe they sneak into the playoffs 1 or 2 years, but you knew they were going home in the first game of the playoffs. Well, now they have something sustainable. And I ask fans this all the time, the skeptical ones. Jaden Daniels has one of the top 2 or 3 selling jerseys in the NFL still. What are people buying these jerseys? Are they looking at Jaden Daniels as a Washington football player or a Commander? they're
The
looking at
young
him as a
fans certainly are
commander.
seeing him as a commander, right?
Absolutely. So that's their brand. Their brand is the W. And I like to think the W represents Washington and winning.
Winning.
And that's what's on the helmet, man. So let's just roll with that. I think Josh Harris, you got to give him credit as an owner. He's done everything this team's touched has turned to gold so far.
Mhm.
I think these uniforms, going back to these Super Bowl era uniforms, those uniforms are fire. I mean, and I'll say it. I'm not a big fan of the current Commander uniforms. I've never been.
Mhm.
And it has nothing to do with, oh, they took away the name, and no. I just don't care for the uniforms as much. Love the helmets. I think that burgundy helmet with the W on it, that matte color, I think that's fire. I really do. The black uniforms were starting to wear on me a little bit. They were starting to come around. Doesn't like the W in the top of the middle of the helmet. But you can't tell me, looking at these photos and looking at these pictures of Jaden Daniels in a Redskins uniform,
Mm.
technically,
Yes.
that's freaking awesome, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a nice look. It really is.
And they get to use the alternate uniforms 4 times. They've given 3 for the old Redskins uniforms, which means they can rock out the black ones at least once this year.
Hmm.
Also, I remember somebody saying to me about the NFC Championship game, and these uniforms that we lost in. Don't worry, because if they get back to the NFC Championship game, they'll still be in the current uniforms, right? They won't be able to use the old ones. I like the red, or not the red, but the burgundy and gold ones that we have now. I
Hmm.
wonder if they'll try to do some mashup of the two. Maybe they can use the gold pants with the stripes full time
Hmm.
and keep the current Commanders
Hmm.
burgundy, because I don't mind that one. I actually liked that kit that they used this year. The white and burgundy pant actually grew on me this year, like, until I saw today's release and thought there is a big difference from what they
There's a
rolled out and
huge
the mold
difference.
joint.
Yeah, this looks like a professionally produced uniform, and I'm not saying that the Nike and the team in the past, but it looked like a rush job. It really did, and it didn't have any life to it. It didn't
Which
have
is
any.
wild, because what did it take them 2 years, like?
Yeah, I don't know. I think to us it may have taken 2 years, but I think maybe they jumped on that thing in a year
And
and
already had it
figure and,
decided.
and exactly. I think they were more focused on the name change than the branding and the uniform. I
Yeah.
remember as the season was going on, you started seeing them putting the W's on the seats in the stadium. So it took time to get stuff done, and then you had a new ownership change. So they have to come in and see what's not working and fix that, and then add what they want to have. So I think Josh Harris has done just about. I mean, this guy has done everything but walk on water since he's been the owner, and
Um,
you got to give him credit for this, man. He's going to spend a lot of money out of his pocket to bring a new stadium back into the city.
mhm.
They're changing the branding. They're trying to bring back a lot of the things within the stadium that used to be a fabric of going to at the time Redskins football games. So now it's almost he's almost made it where you can say the name and not be afraid to say it, just in reference to things, like the past. But they're the Commanders now, and I
Yes.
think whether you like the name or not, if you're winning, it doesn't matter what the name is. It truly doesn't.
If the Redskins portion of the old branding was the most offensive part, and
Hmm.
I say that because there are still plenty of professional teams that have some sort of Native American branding,
Hmm.
but you're looking at like the Blackhawks, who have a
Hmm.
partnership with the Blackhawks, or the Chiefs, which people don't tend to find offensive, or the Braves, that people don't tend to find
Hmm.
offensive. Had this is what the old regime did not want,
Hmm.
any excuse for the fan base to be Redskin, to say Redskins again.
Right.
Now, there's still been, and I say skins all the time, there's a large portion of the fan base that will just always say Redskins. But where do you lean on this? Where it's like, this is what, when people clown the old regime for not just using this,
Mm-hmm.
like they did with the Washington football team.
Mm-hmm.
The kickback is this is what they did not want, giving the opportunity for the fan base to go back to Redskins, which is what everybody was trying to get away from in the first place.
I mean, that's a great point and it's fair, but I do think that the way this was handled, how this was properly done, and you see the excitement for people to see that uniform again, but with the W in it.
Mhm.
I think it's the closest thing that you could possibly do to bridge the past with the present
Mhm.
and get away with it and do it where it's tacked, it's tastefully done. Like I said, to see Jaden Daniels, Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz in that uniform, it brought back a lot of memories for me personally. Like,
Sure.
wow, you remember those days where they were mauling teams in that uniform, and the fact that this team isn't just any old team. This is a team that has legit Super Bowl aspirations. They were in the NFC Championship game last year. They're a better team on paper right now by far than last year's team. You would think that the excitement of seeing all these primetime games, the excitement of seeing that particular alternate uniform, on Sunday Night Football, and against on Christmas Day against the Cowboys, that's the closest thing you can do to bringing the Redskins back without bringing the name Redskins back. And I'm perfectly fine with that. I think they nailed this.
I can't pull it up here because I'm not savvy enough. But on my Twitter account, I posted the full thumbnail that they have with the guys, the 4 or 5 guys you mentioned in the
Mhm,
picture.
mhm,
They've got a locker over where Jeremy Reeves is standing. They've got a locker with all the jerseys in it. Now they're all just the burgundy and white jerseys, all the way up to the very first one. And you know what that very first one is? It is the RG3 era throwback jersey to the deep burgundy with the
mhm,
older Native American head on the side. And
mhm.
I don't want to be a controversialist here, Lake Lewis, but it was the only non-regular jersey in the group. I've long said they'll never get the Indian head back, but this group hasn't done things on accident so far.
No, I've said this and I've tried to stay quiet and not,
Okay?
but I talked to someone last year during training camp, ironically, that the Indian head, the logo was in play, in the future, and that they were really trying to see what the league would let them do. And from what I was told, it was never the logo,
Right?
it's the name.
That's
So
right.
I
I've
think
always
that
said that.
yeah, so I think that logo will be in play. It's never going to come back and be central like, how you have the
Mhm.
helmet there. It's not going to
Yeah,
be on their helmet or anything.
correct.
But it can be in merchandise. It can be in memorabilia where they now can actually push that and sell that stuff and mention it as part of their past because they did change it and now they're branded with that W. And I don't think people would have a problem with that. I truly don't. I don't think Native Americans, and I'm not Native American, so I can't speak on behalf of them, but I don't think that logo is a nice logo, which by the way was done by a Native American.
Yes, it
So it's
was.
so it's not a caricature. It's not Homer Brave in Atlanta where they made
No,
them get rid of that. This is a
no.
real Indian, a real
Royal
Native
Wahoo
American.
in Cleveland.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So if Washington were to do that, and we're not talking about, if you're just joining, we're not talking about bringing that logo back and putting it on the helmet. We're just saying bringing it back to be part of the fabric
Brandon, or
of the
a
brand
throwback if they went to those,
or a
deep
throwback.
burgundy with the on the shoulder plate.
Exactly. Still called the Commanders.
Yes,
Yeah. I, I
that
don't,
was the
I
year
don't,
they tried to rock those leather helmet looking things. You remember? And those
and I
uniforms were
thought
sweet.
those were sweet too,
I do too.
and I used to always say back then they should just put the logo on that and that would be
Right.
something to run with. But yeah, man, I think that everything that they've done, those that feather on stuff, come on, man. I mean
Yeah.
that's the media day, the spear that they had. I mean, these are all things that they're trying to see what they can do. But I
Mhm.
think I think they nailed this because I think most people, I know just from what I saw today, if they ran out the tunnel for 17 games with that uniform, I
Oh,
would be
people would fall
perfectly
asleep. Yeah.
fine.
Uh, and let's just say they're going to
And they
sell
will. And they
they're
will
going
in
to
the
sell a
year.
jersey or two also. Like they
Oh
might they
yeah.
might be all paid for the stadium just off the Jaden Daniel Redskin throwback joints.
Do you know how much money they're gonna make with those jerseys
It's
when
incredible.
that number 5 drops, which probably will be on NFL.com tomorrow.
Mhm.
That thing is gone. It's going to be
Yep.
gone before you blink. And I can see people really going out and buying that. I know people gonna be like, man, I just bought my kid a Commanders jersey. It's still a Commanders jersey. It's just
That's
the
right.
modern look. It's going to be nice.
Yeah. And with no logo on the front, like it doesn't say Commanders or Redskins or
It has the
Washington.
Nike
It was
NFL.
clean.
Yeah,
Yeah. And they used the old 80s print on the nameplate,
they
which I
did.
thought was a nice little. You talk about not missing. I mean, they hit this thing with all the little details.
How many times do we say, may go 10 years back, 15 years back, man, they need to do something to the uniform, jazz it up a little bit. This thing looked like the old uniform, but there's something about it that had just a modern
Yes.
stitching or
Right.
something
Because
to
these
it
aren't
where,
because these aren't like the 2000s. Like this is actually the 80s. So
yeah,
a
this
lot
is
of
an 80s
the folks that
uniform.
were watching in the 2000s aren't familiar with these exact jerseys. And I love people can say what they want. I love the burgundy colander.
Oh my gosh. You know what this
I mean,
uniform is?
'cause
This
the
uniform,
2000s were white, right? I like the burgundy
yeah.
collar.
Yeah, this uniform was, if I'm not mistaken, the year when they had, obviously the Redskins logo. It was
Mhm.
when the feather wrapped around underneath
Okay, right.
so it didn't hang off. It literally,
Yes.
literally wrapped around. That's that uniform right
Okay.
now, and they won in that uniform.
Yes, they did.
They won big.
Funny thing about that helmet behind me. I'm sure you've heard this story, but Doc Walker said when he first got to Washington after being traded from the Browns, maybe whoever it was that he was with, Bengals, one of those two.
Mhm.
He said he was pumped. He thought it was a black guy on the helmet.
Well, I mean,
He was all excited. Thought it
kind
was a black
close.
guy on the helmet.
If you
All
look
right.
into history, there was a lot of slaves going into Indian reservations and being helped and mixing, and it could be.
Getting the good hair.
You know what I mean? Exactly.
All right. People here are tired of talking about, but let's take just a couple minutes to talk about Terry. You know he's getting signed. I know he's getting signed. I tried telling people that don't look at when Terry got his last deal. Those people aren't here anymore, right? Like, think about what Adam Peters in San Francisco did. You're looking at Debo
Mhm.
Samuel's got his deal on the 1st of August. And I think Brandon Ayuk didn't sign till August 30th.
Mhm.
So, like, to me, those numbers are closer to the numbers that we need to be looking at.
Mhm.
Hopefully, he's there at the beginning of training camp. I think what is more important, like, is the numbers for Terry.
Mhm.
And I've been told by a couple different people now that maybe the holdup seems to be more about the guaranteed money
Mhm.
and not the AAV, whether it's 34 or 33 or 32.
Mhm.
It's the guarantee that's being held up right now. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it's the guaranteed money, and
Yep.
and that's normal when it comes to extensions. This isn't a new contract. This is an extension,
That's right.
and that's why guys on their extension want that guaranteed money, because let's face it, and let's be brutally transparent here.
Let's do it.
This is the last big contract Terry will get. Okay. Realistically, we're not saying that he can't, turn back the hand of time and, in 3 years be still killing and doing great job on the field. And I think people think he could be, but realistically, this is the last contract. Like I've been telling people, when Jaden gets his contract, Terry might not be here. Okay.
Yep.
So with that said, Terry wants to make sure he gets the most out of this contract. And then when you look at his numbers, there's two ways you can look at this. Yes, you've had, 5, 6 straight seasons of 1,000 yards. You did it with basically 100 quarterbacks. Okay. But not until last year, when you had a truly elite quarterback, you saw how good Terry was. I don't think anyone thought Terry was that good. We thought he was a really good football player, Pro Bowler, but last year he played as an all pro. I mean, that's how he looked with a legit quarterback. So some people may say that's great, but you got to show me you can do it again. before you get all this money. And I think that that's probably where this comes down to, is that this team's building for long-term sustainability. And I don't think it's a disrespect towards Terry. I just think that there's still other moves that they feel like they could probably make up until the season. And now you have to deal with this. So it's a matter of, you can't reset the market with Terry. You just can't. Every year over the past 5 years, each receiver that's gotten their contract has a record-breaking contract. So the other thing is, all of those receivers, they had like record-breaking guaranteed money.
Right.
And that's what Terry's looking for. There's no doubt in my mind that that's what, might be right now a little bit of the snag. But I think it's going to get taken care of. I truly believe that. And I think when it's all said and done, Terry's probably going to be somewhere around 32, maybe 33 million. And I'm okay with that. T. Higgins just signed for 28 million. DK Metcalf makes over 30 million. And I can
33
argue
and a half almost. I think almost 30.
exactly. I can argue with you that Terry has better numbers than those guys with less quarterback play.
Yes.
So I said a couple weeks ago that I could see him resetting, not resetting the market, but coming in at like 36, 37 million to be the second highest paid,
I
receiver
remember it
in
blew
the
the
game.
internet up.
Yeah, and people were like, "Oh, you're crazy." And I'm not, am I saying he's the second best receiver in the league? No, because I don't think he is. I think he's one of the top 5 or 6, but I don't think he's in the same. I don't think anyone's in the same class as Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Okay, those guys are something different. But with that said, Terry's put up some numbers over the past couple seasons, and last year, that season that he had with Jaden, and just seeing him get better each week. He made plays every game in the playoffs, scored against the Eagles, scored against the Lions, did work against the Buccaneers. He did everything you asked of him. And my only concern, Doug, with this is, if I have one concern, it would be, hypothetically, because that's a hypothetical, because they're going to get this done. I truly believe that. But let's just say they didn't get it done. What does that say to the players in the locker room, that if you do everything the right way, you work hard, you self-make yourself as a player? Terry wasn't expected to be who he is. You do everything right off the field as well. And you are the face of a franchise that gives it your all, 110%. Even when they were losing, he was giving it 110%. Last year when they're winning, he's giving it 110%. What does that say to the other players in the locker room? And if you do everything you're supposed to do as a player, on and off the field, you may not get your money. So,
No doubt.
and I think that they're watching that too. So this is going to get done. I just think because there's not a whole lot to talk about. Thank God for days like today, because Terry but then people are like, well, Terry wasn't in the uniform. So I'm like, my gosh, we can't escape it.
Also, and I know this doesn't necessarily mean anything because people talk, but just 2 months ago, Adam Peters was on with Kay Adams talking about how Terry was going to be with the organization for a long, long time. And people say, well, it doesn't matter what the GM says on a podcast. No, it doesn't. But guys like Adam Peters don't say things on podcasts at all. So why would he say that? So the fact that he says that to Kay Adams, knowing it's going to get out there, says to me, he's telling the truth. And
Saying that he knows Terry's going to be on this team for a long time.
right, that's what I'm saying. There was no point in saying it, 3 years, 33 million a year, 60 guaranteed.
I think the 60 needs to come up just a little bit.
Okay.
I think, I think I was looking at CeeDee Lamb or some of these other guys, and they're like 90 million, 100 million. St. Brown, in Detroit. I think his numbers were, 4 years ago when he reset the whole thing for receivers. He started the party. People were like, Detroit overpaid for him. Maybe they did, but other receivers weren't mad because they knew their day was coming. If you're Washington, do you want to be the team that goes back against what's been happening with these receivers? Because everyone, CeeDee Lamb last year got that money, and people question, is he truly a number one? Yeah, I mean, the number shows he's a number one for sure. And he's had to do it with different quarterbacks because Dak's been beat up quite a bit over the past several seasons. So I think when you look at, Jamar Chase making 40 and T. Higgins getting 28, almost 29. I think Terry clearly should be at the halfway mark in between those guys. So that for me puts it at like 34, 35. I think if you can,
I've got the numbers here real quick.
okay,
Let me tell you.
perfect.
So Terry's last deal, he got 53 guaranteed.
Hmm.
DK Metcalf got 60 guaranteed this offseason. Amon-Ra St. Brown, what did he sign last year? 77 in guarantees. And then by the time you get up some Jamar Chase, to your point, you're at 112 million in total guarantees.
Hmm. I think Terry needs to be at 70 to 75 guaranteed.
That would put him at
Like 4.
5. Brandon Ayuk is 76. Amon-Ra 77. DJ Moore 81. AJ Brown 84. And then CeeDee Lamb is third at 100. So
if that's the case, if those are the numbers for guaranteed money, then I think Terry should be at like 80 because he's right there with these guys, and it's a lot of money, but you spread that out over 3-4 years. I mean, it's doable, and Washington's not in any kind of cap situation. By the way, they have money, and they have a lot of money for next year. And by the way, the cap has gone up again, so it's like $50-something million over what it was 2 years ago. So there's money for people to get their stuff. The question is this, and I do think, when you look at it from a logical standpoint, so you give Terry, 70 million, 80 million guaranteed, give him 3-year extension, and in 3 years, what's coming up? Jaden.
500 million.
It's gonna break the bank. It's gonna be the
50 million probably.
Yeah, it's gonna be the biggest contract in the history of the NFL. And I think they're already accounting for that, and they have a new stadium that's going to be coming up. They have a draft coming in a couple of years. There's a lot of things coming to DC. Money is needed, and so you think of those things. But I just think, man, from a culture standpoint, you have to take care of 17. If there was ever a player that needs to be shown the love and loyalty back, it's him, because he's gone through hell and back for that burgundy and gold brand, and he's just the nicest kid, man. I mean, and Terry's not a kid, but to me, he's a kid. He's much younger than us, but he's just one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And you want to see good guys finish first and not last,
I've been asking this question to a bunch of different people trying to get a feel for it. Are the Commanders concerned that they're bargaining, hustling against themselves because whatever they give to Terry at the end of the year, Debo's coming.
You already knew it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
but you know what?
Back in their mind, or no? Terry's deal is something totally different than Debo's, and we'll get there when we get there. But at some point, you got to kind of be thinking about, we're going to give Terry, and he's going to want.
Yeah, but you know what though, Doug? Terry's deal is kind of like a lifetime achievement award, with the same organization.
Pay people like that, though.
I know, and there are people like, he's not worth it, and I'm like, you're the same jokers that came at me last year when I said before the season, I want to see if Terry can be a number one receiver, like a true, legit one, dominating, and they're like, he already is a number one. What are you talking about? And I'm like, you're not listening. I mean, top 10 category, top 5. Can he be an elite receiver? He played as an elite receiver last year, and elite receivers get paid. That's just the way it is. And I think the only thing going against Terry is his age. That's it. It's not like he threw up these 3 numbers the first 3 years of his career. Where now, we're talking going into your 7th year. It's a little different, and he has mileage on him. Let's call it like it is, So those are all things I'm sure that Adam Peters and company are looking at. But I know they love the guy, and they know that they want him here, and it just has to be something amicable for both parties. I think if you can get 33.5 or 34, per year, and you can get that guaranteed money to 70 plus, it's done. Because I will say this, and I'm not speaking for Terry, but if he's watching and listening, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying this. Terry will give them a little bit of a discount because Terry knows his worth in Washington, He doesn't want to play anywhere else and have to start
Right.
over. And let's face it, do you want to catch passes from someone other than that number five? That's a
Not really.
star. You know, everything is here for everyone for the taking. And that's why it'll get done. I think both parties know that though. So that's where this is, right now, little gamesmanship going on.
How good must it feel for Terry's agent to be able to walk into the negotiation room and say, if Terry's not here, who plays wide receiver for you?
Well, I think Debo looked
Because
really good in
he
OTAs
did,
and
but the
mini
rest of
camp.
that room looks very slim,
Yeah, it's a
bro.
little shaky
Yeah,
at best. I am a Jalen Lane fan. I think he's going to be a
me
phenomenal
too.
rookie. Luke actually looks like he's taking some strides this second season. Like he looks more comfortable. But let's face it, Terry's different. We're talking an elite receiver, and if you think about, you don't go out and get Debo Samuel to replace Terry. That's not what they did that for.
That was
You
not the
went,
point.
yeah, you went out and got Debo Samuel to pair it with Terry to be monsters for Jaden, and you drafted a Jaden Lane, who's a Swiss Army knife type of player to emulate and to look at the goat of that right now is Debo Samuel, playing all these different roles. So everything was done with Terry being in mind, and that's why I keep telling fans it's okay, man. Just it's gonna get done. And if they overpay for him, they overpay for him. I mean, he's deserving of the money that he's asking for. I think it'll be something that both parties can agree is fair, and they can just go ahead and move through training camp and preseason and get this thing ready for a Super Bowl run.
Well, and the last thing on Terry, you don't go out and make the trades and the acquisitions for the players they have the last 2 seasons eh, to support Jaden and then turn around and get rid of his best weapon, right? In year two, like
Exactly.
that makes zero sense. You literally were able to bring the whole band back together as far as the coaching, the backup quarterback. I heard that they sent out the language that they used to his quarterback coach so that he doesn't have to even relearn a different language. It's all going to be the same. And then you'll bring Terry back. Like, what do we do? We're hustling backwards then. So to me, that's the biggest sign of why Terry will be back. If anybody's still concerned, I know neither one of us are, is that it's counterintuitive to everything they've done this offseason if they don't bring back wide receiver one.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that I think guys with Terry not being there benefited, that some people
Yeah.
need to understand. Terry was there for most OTAs, so it wasn't like he's never been there. He's been there working with Debo, working with all these guys. But when it's time for us as media to be there, boom, he wasn't there. So he wasn't there for the OTA sessions that we were there, wasn't there for obviously minicamp. And I think that, again, for people to be worried, it's a legit reason to be worried. But I just think that phrase that floats around with a lot of the fans and Adam we trust. This is the reason why you trust him. I don't think this guy would sabotage one of the best things that has happened to the organization in a long time. This guy is deserving of it. He really is, and I just think it would make for a really good camaraderie. Guys would be happy for him. And players that I've spoken with, they all have said to a man, they're not worried about Terry. They know he's taking care of himself. They knows he'll come in and hit the ground running, and they know it's just part of the business. Even Dan Quinn himself said that right to us in the media room.
Yep.
Yeah, so they know what's going on. It's part of football, but this is the part of football that it matters, but it doesn't matter. What matters is when they kick that ball off against the Giants, in September. That's when it matters.
This is the time of year where everybody is kind of like, who needs to have the best season or, all these different things. And
Yeah.
if we take, obviously, if we take five out of that, and I won't ask you for a list, but I guess I'll tell you mine and then see what you think.
Hmm.
In my mind, the person with the biggest thing to prove this year is
Hmm.
Laramie Tunsil. And this is a guy with
Not
no
bad.
guaranteed money left after this year,
Hmm.
needs a new deal. Now, he can be productive and they can be productive. But in my mind, a guy that's probably, you talk about the last bag situation with Terry,
Hmm.
this is probably the last big bag for Laramie, too. I mean, I'm 33 years old, I think. So to me, he's got as much to prove to this regime as anybody else that hey, I need that big money.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, he does, and I think his body of work will show people why they're going to end up paying him. And
Yeah.
again, you don't make a move for that player if you don't have any intention of keeping him and Jaden Daniels together for years to come. You don't draft a Josh Connolly Jr. To man the right side of the field for years to come, and ultimately probably move in and replace a Laramie Tunsil at left tackle at some point. But all these moves are made for long-term stability, not just quick gun hires. That's not the case. A guy that I would tell you that has a lot to prove is Marshawn Lattimore,
Yes.
because we know he's a great football player. And I keep trying, I've been defending the guy because I think he's a heck of a player. He showed toughness and grit last year on one leg and got the attention of guys like AJ Brown. He was in his head for a little bit. So coming back healthier. He lost a lot of weight. He looks totally different in that number 2 uniform. Almost didn't recognize
Yes.
him out of minicamp. So you think about what he has to prove and the fact that, he was doing this with really not a lot of help in front of him. They didn't have the best pass rush last year. They were getting ran on. So if you're a corner on the edge, and you're having to check the other team's best player and you still have to worry about all these other things not happening and breaking down around you, you're not going to play your best football. So he has a lot to prove. Deron Payne has a lot to prove.
Yes.
Deron's in a contract year. We remember the last time he was in a contract year, he had his best year. So they're banking on that. But if Deron does not play up to the capability that he's capable of, it'll be like John Allen. They'll get rid of him because they
Is there
need.
anything? Is there anything Duran can do this year to get him a contract here next year?
Absolutely. I mean,
Really? Yeah.
yeah, he's a nice dude, well liked, good locker room guy, really good football player. The problem with Duran is he's just been inconsistent. There's times he has dominant stretches where he's
Yeah.
tossing guys, but then there's stretches where you're waiting, you need him to be there, and he's not. So I think with some of the moves that they made, to be around him, the Eddie Goldman's, Dietrich Wise, Javon Kinlaws, these are much bigger guys. They make him look like a baby, and they brought those guys in to hold up the line, to establish an edge so people can't run on them. And so it should free him and Johnny Newton up to make plays, as tackles. So he's got a lot to prove. Thinking of another guy that's got a whole lot to prove is Brian Robinson. Because I'm just telling you, man, what I see with Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, that kid is something. He really is. Is he Saquon? No, he's not. I mean, I'm Penn State, so nobody's pretty Saquon. But I am saying that I think Krosky Merritt will take touches away from Brian. But
I
it's up.
said by the middle of the season he'll lead the running back room in touches. I totally believe that.
I'm not going to argue with you. I'll go one further. I think the 2 backs to keep your eye on for this team that could take touches away from Austin as well. I think Demetric Felton is another guy, and
Okay.
I think Ja'Cory and Demetric might be your 2 guys that take this offense from a running back standpoint to another level. And the reason is because one can cut and take it to the house at a 4-3. The other one's a 4-3 that can catch passes out the backfield. So Austin catches passes and he plays well. But when you throw 4-3 at people across the board with the weapons we expect them to have on the outside, and Jaden with more protection up front where he can survey a field more or make decisions more, man, the offense has the potential to be deadly. And of course, that happens only if they re-sign Terry, which they will.
Yeah, I mean the word of the day is explosion, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm,
that's
mm-hmm,
what they missed last year. How many times did they start at the 5-yard line
mm-hmm,
and have to get a couple of 4th and 1s and 4th and 2s to
mm-hmm.
get down? I mean, they need to be able to pick up chunk plays because to break historical records on 4th down probably not going to happen again this year, and they can
Exactly.
fix that by the explosion. The pushback to me, Lake, the name I often hear is Brian Robinson Jr. The only pushback for me is I don't think there's any chance he's on the team next year. And frankly, if he's not on this team next year, I don't think another team's picking him up to be the starter. It's just not how it works anymore, right? You can get a starter in the 3rd round.
Yeah,
And
people
so
think I kill
that's the
him.
only reason I say that I don't think like his big year is quite as important as anybody else's.
Yeah, that's fair, and people think that I'm harsh on Brian, and I'm not. I always preface it by saying he's a really good football player,
He is.
but he's not, in my opinion, a featured back. What he is to me is David Montgomery. David Montgomery had some solid years in Chicago, and Brian's had some solid years in Washington, but you didn't really realize how good David Montgomery was until what he was paired with Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think that that's what the intent was, to bring in an Austin Eckler. But Austin, we know he has the head injuries, and he could be a hit away from things changing drastically with that. So I think more importantly, you need speed in this offense. This offense is Cliff Kingsbury's offense. If you have speed at that position, which they hadn't had, it just opens up everything. Like, you're really talking sky's the limit. And I think for Brian, if he does his part, he'll be around, but he won't be the featured guy
Sure.
that other coaches have tried to make him. That's not his game.
And the league's not even really using featured backs anymore. I
They're
mean,
not.
unless
It's
you're
by
Saquon or
tandem.
Derrick Henry, it's by committee anyway. So I
Exactly.
mean,
And I know I already heard, from somebody up in Baltimore that they want to make sure the kid Mitchell, now that he's had a full year of
right.
recovery from his ACL, they want to get him more touches this year so Derrick Henry's not worn down by playoff time.
I have my theory on this, and I've said it a bunch on the podcast. I'm curious about yours. I think you mentioned all the additions to the offensive line, and we talked about Cliff Kingsbury and him wanting more explosion. I
Mhm.
wonder how much of Cliff's offensive playbook they just threw out last year because they couldn't protect Jaden properly enough to let
Mhm.
him sit in
Mhm.
there, get the reads, get downfield over some of those crossers. And now, hopefully, with the additions of 2 new tackles and getting your tackle in the guard where he's better off, I wonder how much they weren't able to do last year, so that when folks say, well, they've had a whole year to catch up on Jaden and Cliff Kingsbury, I wonder how much of that, thrown out playbook they're able to bring back this year and still really surprise folk.
You know, that's the one thing, Doug. I mean, that's why I love coming on with you, man. That's the one thing I have been trying to tell people. They did all this last year with not a whole lot of talent as far as skill set game breakers.
Mhm.
And they did this with a rookie quarterback, by the way. They did this with I don't want to say a makeshift line, but it was put together kind of quickly. Okay. They have everything now.
Love
And,
poor
and
Lewis. He was playing left tackle last year.
I mean, come on, man. You know what I'm saying? Like you went into last year saying they had Wiley over there, Cornelius Lucas was gone. I mean, it was so many things that were changing. And I think now, when you really look at the big picture and you talk about the speed now in the running back room, it is so many weapons that Cliff Kingsbury will have now at his disposal that he can open the playbook up. It's the second year for Jaden to be able to come to the line of scrimmage and know what a defense is looking like. He did pretty well with that last year, but experience is always better than anything else, in anything in life. Just experience makes a difference. So I could tell you in minicamp, I could tell you in OTAs, but especially in minicamp, the ball wasn't hitting the field. It was just Jaden not having to be Superman out there. He just looked comfortable, more comfortable than, like last year, a lot of stuff looked staged. And I don't mean staged in, it wasn't real. I mean, it was go to this progression and maybe go to this one. And then as
Right.
the season progressed, you started seeing him looking over the whole field. This year, he can look around the whole field and have a weapon all over the field that he can feel comfortable getting the ball to. There's no doubt in my mind there were times last year I saw Jaden pull the ball back because he wasn't comfortable with who he was throwing the football to. Not the case now. You throw that bubble screen that they used to like to throw last year, you throw that to Debo Samuel or Jalen Lane and watch what's going to happen. It's going to be different because they have guys now that know what to do with that. And more importantly, don't put the ball on the ground.
Like a lot of the fan base was wary, disappointed that
Mhm.
they didn't add some kind of explosion on the defensive edges.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Mhm.
But but I'd contend that they've totally decided they're going to go a different way on defense this year. You tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Mhm,
I think they decided that they're going to bulk up the edges as big
mhm,
as they can. The fastest way to get to the quarterback is in a straight line. They'll
mhm,
rush the defensive tackles
mhm.
with Johnny Newton and Deron Payne, who are more like nimble bears than these big guys they've got on the edges. And then you'll watch guys like McGee and Luvu fly all around. I'd suggest Luvu leads the team in sacks this year. Am
Mhm.
I crazy to think that that's what we're doing this year, and that's why they didn't feel the need to add the speed on the edge, if you will?
Man, that's you hit the home run. You hit it right on the head. And I'll go one even better. You go back to college when Mikey Sainristil was at Michigan. He was a blitz demon
Okay,
off the edge
right.
as a corner. Trey Amos can blitz. So they're looking at it like all these super abnormally large men, because they do have some monsters on the defensive line now. If they're holding up guys, you can let some of your other guys blitz and disguise things. There's a reason why Kane Madrano was drafted. Dom Hampton, remember him too. Another athletic, fast guy that's converted to linebacker. So they feel like they have speed now, like real speed, killer speed. The other thing that I think sometimes people fail to remember as far as the defense by and large, it wasn't so much the pass rush that was killing them. It was the fact that they were getting ran on, and they were
Yes,
getting
right.
ran on at the edges. So, like you said, Dietrich Wise is a strong man. He's going to hold you up. Javon Kinlaw is going to hold you up. And more importantly, those guys are versatile. They can move around on that defensive line too and give you different looks, a la something we never saw when Jack Del Rio was the coach. You knew exactly where Chase was going to be. You knew where Montez was going to be, John Allen and Duran, and it never worked. So now they can mix up some things and do things differently to get to people. And then the other thing is when you look at the NFC East, and this is what the other thing I try to get fans to understand, there's only one quarterback that pretty much stays in the pocket, in the NFC East right now as far as the starters, and that's Dak Prescott. Okay. Jalen Hurts is a guy that beats you with his legs. He's an improv guy. He can go off script too. But he's a guy that will take off on you at times. So you have to basically play your lanes and do the right things there. And then if you look at Russell Wilson now, potentially, obviously the starter, at least for right now in New York with the Giants, he's the same way. He's going to take off on you. We saw that in the Pittsburgh game last year. So if they have guys that won't give up those type of plays and they let their playmakers make plays, I think the defense is going to be so much better this year. I truly believe that. And I think Javon Kinlaw is about to have a monster season for this football team.
Okay. And your guy Cleveland Farrell is still there too, right?
Cleveland
And
Farrell. Yep.
he was on his way to a decent start to the
Until he
season
got
last
hurt.
year, and then he got
Yeah.
hurt. Yeah,
And they like him. And see,
I remember you told me that last year.
there's a reason why Dante Fowler Jr. is not here.
Yeah, he was
I think
unplayable. He was unplayable in the playoffs.
yeah, and I think his tweets didn't help either, but still, but I'm telling you, I think that they felt pretty good about what they have in the building, and that's why you haven't seen any rushes for J.J. Watt or Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah.
I think they feel like we were in an NFC Championship game last year, and this roster is without question better than last year's roster, and now and the Eagles did have some subtractions. They're still the Eagles, Super Bowl champions, best team in football, in my opinion. But I think if look, I saw some of their players on other shows, and when they were asked, who's the team that you look forward to playing, and the team that you feel like might be one of those teams you got to look for, all of them. They were saying the Commanders. So it's a real respect level
God bless
around there.
Jaden Daniels. All right, I want to hit one more topic before we get out of here. Like the safety room to me is the most intriguing of all of it. I actually like the cornerback room in its depth, assuming that Lattimore stays somewhat healthy. But they let Jeremy Chin go, who signed a very small contract with the Raiders. It was obvious they didn't want to keep him because that contract was more than doable. They bring in Will Harris. What do they like about Will Harris? And did they bring him in for Marshawn Lattimore because they were there together in the Saints. Is that more of a relationship thing?
Man, it's so funny hearing you say these things because that's a fact. And I know Marshawn and I know Bobby Wagner were instrumental in Will Harris
Okay.
coming in. And yeah, absolutely. Those are comfort level things that help people, when you know what's going to happen behind you. And Will Harris is a Swiss Army knife. He's a guy that can play free safety, strong safety, where I think he'll start naturally at strong safety because Quan Martin will be your starting free safety. But he's also a guy that can move into the box and be a linebacker. He's a guy that's played some corner when he was in Detroit. So he's just a versatile player. And I think that that's the one area where Jeremy struggled. Jeremy was a great tackler, would come up and put his hat on you, but he wasn't the best guy in coverage. And how many times did you see those big plays given up back there? So I think when you have a guy like Will Harris that has a little bit more of a ability to track a ball, not just the carrier of the ball, but a ball that's in the air, I think it'll help. And I think people are going to really like that guy. I think he's going to be a difference maker for this football team.
Okay. Who ends up being? I heard Joe Witt Jr. in one of his pressers talking about finding ways to get Jeremy Reeves on the field more on defense.
Hmm.
You and I both have been able to talk to Jeremy. Great dude, hard worker. I
Hmm.
like him on the field when he plays. He just doesn't get on there very much. Does he end up being safety three, or is it
Tyler Owens.
Tyler Owens? Okay, I was thinking Percy Butler. You think Tyler Owens?
I think Percy and Tyler
Okay.
they're very well liked, but
I forget
Percy.
about Tyler Owens.
Exactly. And see, I think Tyler is a guy that can learn from a Will Harris, move
Okay.
around and do some different things because he's such an athlete. And then Percy can be back there with Quan, as coming in on packages with him too. And I know they like him. So Jeremy is Jeremy. Jeremy's a great special teams guy, great locker room guy. But then you have Nick Ballore on the team too, who's a special teams guy, Pro Bowler as well. And then you have some of these young guys that are going to have to play special teams. So you start wondering, do you keep around specialty players if they're not really getting on the field? And that's why I say you have to look at some other guys that may be playing safety as well. That could cause some problems. There's going to be some
You're
surprise
not
cuts from
suggesting
this.
Jeremy Reeves won't make the team this year.
I'm not saying I think he's going to, but I'm just saying I would
Okay.
not be
I hear
surprised if
I hear what you said.
yeah, I will that at the end of the day, there's some good football players on this team.
Yep.
See, these are the problems that we talked about years ago. It'd be nice if Washington had problems where, you didn't know the 53-man roster in May.
Right.
Well, now if you ask me to make a 53-man roster right now, I don't know if I can because
Okay.
I think that listen, if Krosky Merritt shows out in camp and Demetric Felton shows out in camp, uh, you could
Okay.
have a different looking running back room. Yeah,
I dig it. Last one, is Quan Martin the most underrated player on the team?
yes, he's smart. He's
Easily, right?
easily
People
like
don't. The fan base doesn't realize how good he is.
no, no, no,
He's a
no.
freaky athlete too.
This guy's really good, and I mean I think you know not until last year I thought he wasn't utilized up until last year. You saw what Joe Witt was trying to do with him. And you saw like when he played the bulk, I think it was 75% of his snaps were at free safety. I don't think people realize that. That's where he should have been from day one.
Yes.
And, they were moving him around, Ron Rivera, and they were doing different things. But last year you saw like, man, the light bulb was on and he helped set plays and things like that. The guy's just a smart football player. And I think this year you're going to see him be able to make plays where he's attacking the ball. We saw that in the Detroit game. You go back to the Detroit game. Mikey had 2 interceptions. I think Quan had 1, if I'm not mistaken. But you saw what they were able to do back there. And now you add in a Trey Amos, into the mix. He's special. I'm telling you, he's special. I'll go out on record and say this. Washington has their 2 cover corners for the next 10 years, and Mikey and Trey Amos. Obviously Marshawn's there now, Jonathan Jones are there, and those 2 young guys can learn from those 2 vets big time. But in about 2 years, those are going to be your 2 starting corners on both sides, and it's going to be something nice with Quan Martin as your starting free safety too.
That Quan Martin draft was when you remember Brian Branch had thought that they were going to draft him.
Yeah.
We and they ended up taking Quan instead. We had Jaden Nagy, former director of the Senior Bowl, on right after that draft, and he said if he had his pick, he would have taken Quan Martin over Brian Branch purely off the athleticism and never looked back.
Listen, if I had had my pick, I would have taken Quan Martin before Emmanuel Forbes.
Well, yeah.
Because, and that's not disrespecting, I'm just saying he was a better football player than Emmanuel Forbes coming out of college. People don't realize Quan Martin was at that Illinois team that was loaded. Their secondary, led by Witherspoon at the time, they were loaded, and Quan Martin was still one of their guys. So it's worked out now, okay? But it wasn't working out before. But it's working out now. And yes, to get back to your original question, I think he's probably their most underrated player. And outside of Bobby, he's one of their smartest players. He's right there, top 5 smartest players on the Commanders for sure.
Lake, you're the best, buddy. I always love doing these with you, man. Let's do it again once camp starts.
Absolutely. Anytime you need me on, let me know, my friend. I'm here.
All right, buddy. Appreciate you.
Okay, take care, my friend.